I want to bring a few thoughts out of Psalms 46. Psalms 46, King David wrote this psalm, and what amazes me is David writes sometimes these songs in one of his most darkest experiences of his life. Sometimes he is in a real predicament, in a real mess. Sometimes he's in a context where you almost think it's got to be hopeless, and yet oftentimes it's in those moments where he writes some of the most profound things, because he's learning that no matter what comes against him, what's inside of him is greater, and he's able to rise above. So the obstacle then becomes an opportunity for growth and transformation. I know that we're all frustrated with what decisions are being made, and I hear it, I get it, I get the emails, I get the phone calls, I get all that stuff, I totally get it, but I have to remind myself something that I think it's easy to forget. You and I, as followers of Jesus, don't belong to this world. When I'm in a foreign country and that foreign country makes a decision that causes upheaval, I don't care about that because I don't belong there. I'm just visiting. And I know that at the end of the day, when I'm going to go home at some point, I don't want us to be bent out of shape because of decisions that are made beyond our control. We've got to learn to understand that we're from another kingdom. I can't help but I go back and I look at the Old Testament, because there's some predominant men and women that God used in extraordinary circumstances that if they understood, they were to protest and come against and all these things, they wouldn't have had the impact that they did. Because I think of Daniel, for instance. Daniel was a captive. He was taken prisoner from his homeland and taken to another country. Now, if anyone would have something to complain about, I'm sure Daniel would have a list of things to complain about. I don't belong here. You took me from my home. But instead, it's interesting when you look at Daniel's life, he took the circumstances that were handed to him and he began to use them as opportunities to bring the kingdom of heaven. And as a result, Daniel rose to a position of influence and power, not because he was angry all the time or frustrated at the decisions the king made. In fact, Daniel served under a very ungodly king. And yet his character and his attitude and how he functioned took notice, and he got promoted more and more and more and more until he was a predominant leader in a very ungodly country. And yet God's hand was on him in the midst of those things, and he brought influence and change. Even to the point where there was a point in Daniel's life where some of the people were jealous of what was happening to Daniel, and they knew Daniel was a person of faith, so they didn't realize how could we trap him into some kind of thing to get him demoted. And so they decided that he's a person of integrity, he serves the king, and all these things, but he said there's one issue we can get him at, and that is his faith. So they met with the king and said, hey king, you know what, we're going to build I wasn't a statue, we want you to give a law. And in that law is everybody has to pray to you for 30 days. And if they don't, they need to be thrown in the lion's den. King figured that's a great idea. He decreed a law, changed the culture, made a decision. Everybody had to pray to him for the next 30 days or face the den of lions. What did Daniel do? Did he go to the town square and protest and write letters and demand answers and come on, what's going on here? What did he do? He didn't even go to the town square to pray. He went into his home, in the privacy of his own home, and he kept praying. Not inconvenienced, oh Lord, persecution, oh God. He just did what he always did. And the only reason why they were caught him because these little bandits followed him to his house and looked through his windows and seen what he did. And then they ran to the king. We caught Daniel, praying to his God. Daniel was thrown in the lion's den, but it's amazing after 3 days that he was there. Who was the first person to be at the door to see if God saved him was the king. That's how much influence he had. That's how much favor he had. Then I look at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego standing in the midst of that culture change and things that were going on, and were men of integrity. I look at Esther. I look at Joseph. I mean, Pharaoh was not a godly man at all. In fact, they viewed him as God. And yet Joseph chose, in the midst of his circumstances, to thrive and make the most out of them. And he brought influence and change. And as a result, he had authority to make decisions and change the culture. Not by fighting and stomping, but by bringing the kingdom. I want to tell you something this morning that I don't want us to forget. The kingdom of heaven is more alive inside of us than anything else on the outside of us. But what we're most aware of will have the greatest influence. These are moments now that we can go back and learn from the past. They're moments where we can really focus on what really matters and what's important. And I'm telling you, I don't believe we're in these moments and these times by accident. I believe God has prepared us for moments like this because He's convinced that His kingdom will thrive no matter what. We just have to be aware of that because our greatest influence is what we're most aware of. We're citizens of a kingdom that's much greater than anything that can happen here. And what I like in Psalms 46 is King David really brings perspective to how great God is in the midst of shifting and turmoil. Starting in Psalms 26, he says in verse 1, God is our refuge and strength. Refuge is always a place that you can go to for protection. You can go to knowing that when you're there, you are safe. So he begins by saying, God is our refuge and strength. And then he says this, always ready to help in times of trouble. What David's doing is he's declaring something that is true and that he's also experienced. Always ready. When someone is always ready, it doesn't matter what time of day, it doesn't matter the circumstances, it doesn't matter inconvenience, it doesn't matter if there's shifting that has to happen. When someone is ready, ever ready, that means they're right at the spot ready to give you a hand. And he says that that's what God is. He is ready. He is always ready to help in times of trouble. And then he goes on to verse 2, he says, so we will not fear. So we will not fear when earthquakes come and mountains crumble in the sea. Let the oceans roar and foam. Let the mountains tremble and the waters surge. He's describing not a little event, he's describing what goes on in one's life many times. It feels like we're in an earthquake at times. It feels like mountains crumble. Like we feel like the oceans are roaring and the foam is increasing and the mountains tremble and the water surges. I don't know about you, but sometimes circumstances seem overwhelming. And the first thing that we often do is panic and think the worst. David says, God is our refuge and strength, so we will not fear. Even though the earthquakes come and the mountains tremble and crumble into the sea, let the oceans roar and the foam, and let all the mountains tremble as the waters surge. Going down to verse 6, the nations are in chaos. Their kingdoms are crumbling. God's voice thunders and the earth melts. The Lord of heaven's armies is here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress. And then there's a word that says interlude, or depending on your translations, it says Selah. I'm going to get into that. It says it twice. Verse 3, it says again, the oceans roar and the foam and the mountains tremble as the water seethes. And then there's the word Selah. And then he goes on and continues to talk about how great God is in the midst of whatever we are. The Lord's heaven's armies is here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress. Selah. And then I want to park in verse 10. It says this, be still. Be still and know that I am God. Be still. In the midst of all this stuff, in the midst of things that seem to be rapidly shifting and changing, and things are never the same, and it seems like it's rocky, be still. And I don't know about you, but the last thing I like to feel in chaos is stillness. I'm rocking. I'm rolling. I'm dreaming. I'm scheming. I'm figuring. The last thing on my mind is to be still. Now, when somebody be still, things are in control. It's like, It's like you've accomplished, you've been working on a project and it's really put a lot of time and effort into it, and it's really took a lot of energy and thought. And you know how sometimes when you overthink stuff, and it's almost like you finally got this project done, and you sit down on a recliner and just go, it's behind, I'm still. But yet when things aren't done, we're not still, we're agitated, we know there's more work to be done. And being still is something that it feels like you have to accomplish something in order to receive something. And here he's telling us that regardless of what's going around us, be still. Are you out of your mind? No, he's perfectly in his mind, David says. Being still and know. That knowing is a knowledge that's acquired because you've seen. You see, we're influenced by the things that we focus on the most. Knowing is a seeing, a recognizing. This knowing isn't a knowing that has to do with school and education where you're taught something and then you know it and then it's tested and you know it. This knowing is because your eyes have been opened and you see who God is. And because you see who He is, because it's been revelated to you, you can rest in the midst of turmoil. Be still and know. You know what? God loves to show Himself to us. Even in the midst of turmoil, there is a rest. There are three things that I just want to quickly give you this morning that I think we can pull out of this and apply to whatever situation we're in. I don't know, is this making sense? Three things that I think David says in this short psalm that I think we can pull out and fit into our life. And that's important. Change never happens because change is so powerful. Change happens because we set ourselves up and step into the things that we have to decide on. That's where change happens. And God, through His Spirit, empowers us in that realm to be able to make those decisions that sometimes we think we can't. He's there to help us. He says that right in Psalms 46 and verse 1. God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. Always ready. Wow, if I would have known that, I would have asked for help a lot sooner. How many times have we said that? If I would have known you knew, I would have asked you sooner. Always ready. What can we pull out of this thing? Three things that I think we can pull. One, first of all, we need to recognize that God is our ever-present help. Because we're not alone. We feel alone. Like I said last Sunday, sometimes we feel like we're out of options. But David clearly reminds us in no matter what's going on, we need to recognize that he is our ever-present help. Present means he's there in the now moments. Well, describe a now moment. A now moment is when something happens now, it's a now moment. Right? You're in traffic and the red light goes red, you stop, that's a now moment, right? You don't think, okay, what's going to happen down the road? No, a now moment is now. Wherever you find yourself, he's a now God. And he's always ready to help in the now moments. We need to recognize that he is our ever-present help. This is a promise. When he's writing this with conviction and truth. He is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. The word trouble there means turmoil, uncertainty, shifting, rolling things, something that isn't solid that should be solid. It's just giving you the idea, kind of describing chaos. That's where he wants to help us. The challenge sometimes is we often don't get what we're expecting, and then we're disappointed. We often want a specific kind of help when God sees the big picture and knows what kind of help we need. How many of us want a financial miracle, right? Oh, we just need our bills paid. We want, it'd be nice to win the lottery. Just financially, it would be great. But what kind of help does he give us? Sometimes that help is teaching us through his word how to navigate and make decisions so that what we do have grows. What kind of help are we looking for? Are we looking for an escape from or ability to? I want to have ability to. Recognize he is our ever-present help. Listen to this. God never prevents bad things from happening, but rather he gives us what we need to be able to thrive through it. Hey, Daniel faced the lions. Spent 3 days in the lion's den. I can't imagine what that would have been like. Tommy, Billy, Margie, come on here, let's have a talk, lions, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego get thrown in the flames of fire to be burned, and only to have guards look in and go, didn't we throw 3 men in? I see 4, and the one looks like the Son of God. It's like, whoo! See, knowing is recognizing. Do we recognize? We need to recognize that he is our ever-present help. Second thing I think we need to pull out of here is we need to encourage ourselves to prioritize the importance of interludes in our life. How many know what interludes means? I really didn't know what it is. I had to look in the dictionary. Why do I use that term? I use that term because when you look at Psalms 46, there's a series of verses that are written out first, and then it says Selah, or interlude. And then there's another series of 4 or 5 verses, and then the word comes up again, Selah, or interlude. And then you read a little bit further, and after you read some of this stuff, there's another one that says Selah, or interlude. In fact, if you look in the Psalms, and just look at the pages, you can see how many times Selah, or interlude, is mentioned. And so I asked the question, why would you read 3 verses and then have an interlude? And then another 3 or 4 and an interlude, and then another couple of an interlude. Why put that in there? What does it mean to have interlude? Most people believe because the Psalms were mostly songs. They were written out of difficulty or places of wonder, not sure, places of worship. A lot of them were songs. And in songs, when you're reading something and you want kind of a break or you want a reflection point or a time where you've just said some important stuff and you just want to reflect, you have an interlude. You have a Selah moment. What I find interesting is when I read chapter 46, there are 3 in this chapter. And after he says, God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble, so we will not fear. When earthquakes come and mountains crumble into the sea, let the oceans roar. We're not moved by that. Let them foam up. Let the mountains tremble as the waters surge. Selah. It's almost like Paul is saying, I want a moment in this psalm when you're reading it to have a moment to really reflect on what's being said. Because what's being said is so powerful that we miss it if we just read through it. He interjects a Selah moment, an interlude. Think, ponder what's just being said. And then he says, a river brings joy to the city of God, a sacred home to the Most High. God dwells in that city, and all these different things. The Lord of heaven's armies is here among us. God of Israel is our fortress. Selah. Think about think about it. So this is who God is in the midst of our situation. Those are Selah moments. The interesting thing is with Selah or interlude moments is you have to interject them. They don't come automatically. They're interjected on purpose. How many times have we read some powerful stuff, experienced some great things, and we haven't had those Selah moments where we've really just, wow, I can't believe what just happened. This is incredible. Those are Selah moments. And then right after he says in verse 10, be still and know that I'm God. And then verse 11, the Lord's heaven's armies are here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress. Selah. Interlude. Think about it. Think about it. Wow. We are not victims in this world. We are victors because of the kingdom of heaven alive inside of us. Yes. Yes. That was poor. We're not victims. We're victors. Because of what's on the inside of us can't be shaken. Oh, woo! God is our refuge and strength. He's our safety. He's our fortress. When you talk about a fortress, you're talking about an impenetrable place that's safe from any attacks. You don't worry about any outside forces. When you're there, you can have coffee and not worry about the battle out there because you're in a fortress. And David says, God is our fortress. Selah. And then he says he's our refuge and our strength. Selah. Wow. We've got to learn to prioritize the importance of interludes. Sometimes you have to look yourself in the mirror when you're under pressure and stress and feel like the world is crumbling. Selah. Selah. When I find my life gets busy and it starts rolling off the assembly line before all the parts are there, do you know what I mean? It's just like, slow the bus down. I haven't got the tires on. Before that, the windshield. It's like you just, and it just all piles up in a crumble. And then alarms go because it jams everything up. And you stand there and go, where do I start picking up the pieces? If you just would have slowed down, like everything came at, sometimes life does that. But that's why we have to have Selah moments where we reflect, we ponder on what God has done in our life, because he's done an awful lot. If you think wearing these is persecution, oh my goodness, the Church of China would have a lot more to say about persecution than us in North America that had it easy for so long. Inconvenience. Well, our rights. No, we're kingdom people. We don't belong to this world. I don't carry a dual citizenship. My citizenship is in heaven. The reality of God's truth is where my life is parked. I want to tell you, our government isn't our enemy. They're not. They do what they've always meant to do. And we're unshakable in the midst of it. We are. Refuge and strength, always ready to help us in times of trouble. Wow, my goodness. I need Selah moments. I need moments where I stop and reflect on what God is declaring over my life, because I'm influenced by the things that I focus on the most. There's a third thing. Prioritize importance of interludes in your life. Sometimes we have to find the moments. We need to create the opportunities. Sometimes we have to learn to find the pause button in the midst of everything, because if we don't find those Selah moments where we reflect on God's truth and the things and who I am and what's available to me and where I belong and all these things, that assembly line just keeps going, and I can't put the parts on fast enough, and it just piles up into a mess. And our life is too important just to pile up and allow things just to overcome. We are overcomers by nature. We are people that can take responsibility for our actions, our thoughts, and and He's going to help us. I mean, win. That's like going to Vegas knowing that whatever your hand is, you're going to win. It's like, I would walk in there with my head high and shoulders. I would rent a tuxedo. I would rent a limo, because, hey, I'm walking out of here. Everything's in my favor. Now, don't do that, because you probably won't win. That's not how it works. But I'm just using an illustration that when you know you're a victor, when you know that the truth has been spoken over my life, God favors my life, not because I'm favorable, because He burst something inside of me that is greater than anything else. And we're win-win. We win. When we're in trouble, we have someone ever-present help. And sometimes we get ourselves into trouble. That's awesome, but you know what? God's there to help us. And I'm glad that He doesn't judge or fold His hands and go, that's just crazy. This is the 5th time. He's like, whoa, this is 5 already. Look, and let's go. Sometimes with me, it's like, this is number 50. Let's go. It's like, I don't look at the numbers. I'm just here to help, and I'm going to help you because I know who you are and what you're capable of doing, and whatever's around you doesn't have the necessary power and influence to shape you, because, okay, let's Selah that for a moment. Selah that. Jeez. Jeepers creepers, as some kids say. That is awesome stuff. Third thing, practice. Recognize that He is ever-present help. Prioritize the importance of interludes and Selahs in our life. Third, practice what you're learning so we can live out the abundance that's promised to us. Kingdom truth, kingdom reality doesn't just happen. We get the privilege to align ourselves with it. And when we do, the benefits are all ours. Let's go to Vegas. No. You're quiet today. Are we living out of the abundance that we are proclaimed over us? The tragedy often is we get to that point and we feel like it's self-effort that gets us there, and so we try hard and we memorize and we pray and we say the right things and we correct people all around us because we are wanting to try so hard for this favor when it's already ours. It's already ours. We just have to step into it. And man, what a transforming reality it is when we just step into it. Powerful reality of the Christ life in us. Paul says this, I no longer live, but Christ lives through me. That's an exchange. That's an exchange. This world for the kingdom world. when the king of the world becomes more alive and more real, we're less concerned about this world. He says in verse 10, and I want to leave it at that, he says this, be still. The Greek translation of the Old Testament, it says, rest. Rest, 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 knowing I'm God. Rest. 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 Be still. Keep in mind, he says, even when the earthquakes come, and the mountains crumble into the sea, and the oceans roar, and the foam, and the mountains tremble at the water surge, and all these things that are going on, he says, be still. Be still. I think, and I'm going to close with this, I think the circumstances around us are defining moments of how real and alive the kingdom is inside of us. They're defining moments. They're opportunities for what's inside of us to shine. Peace in the midst of chaos. Rest in the midst of storm. Perspective in the midst of no perspective. It's a rest. It's a rest. And it's something we can experience, not because we've earned it, because of Him alive in us is a byproduct of that rest. Amen?
Hey, thanks for watching, and make sure you subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss a single video or podcast, and share these videos with a friend. And don't forget, you can join us live every Sunday.